Peace. What's good? How y'all doing? This is ZaZaAli. Today is Tuesday, November 29th, 2022. I pray that this message reaches you all in the best of health, spirit, and mind. I am doing very well. I am knee deep in this book, Ancient People, and that's been taking up most of my time as of late, but I wanted to stop and to share this message with you all today, based on an email that I received from a lovely young woman, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. But I wanted to, yesterday I tried to upload, let me share my other screen here. Yesterday I tried to upload a 15-minute clip on YouTube, my headline news episode 12. I did upload it, but it told me that the video was basically going to be blocked in the majority of countries that my audience, come from, particularly the United States, which is the majority of my audience. But it blocked the video from being seen because of a clip of a Canadian television station and Justin Trudeau's appearance on a drag queen television show, which I'll get into in just a second. But basically what I was in this 15-minute clip, that is a 15-minute clip of the full episode of Headline News, episode 12 with ZaZaAli. And you can get access to that by joining my membership channel, or you can view it on demand on my website as well. I'll put all of that information in the description. But this particular news story that I was talking about, Brazil school shootings, 3 including 1 child, 2 teachers killed after 16-year-old opens fire. The reason why I was sort of highlighting the school shooting, number one, Brazil doesn't have school shootings that often, and number two, it is said that this 16-year-old gunman was wearing a swastika, and so that point and the different sort of situations and experiences that are happening more often in terms of this symbolism and this Nazism is starting to happen more and more in the collective consciousness. This video on the left-hand side is of this crazy, out of his mind white dude at the Seattle airport, basically throwing up, Hail Hitler and screaming at the top of his lungs. Is just absolutely hysterical. And then the imagery that you see in the other images, number one, of Biden in the center, which I talked about in several of my previous videos. This is a very satanic, authoritarian, V for Vendetta, Hitler type vibe in this image. And so the man in the high castle, which is the image, the promotional imagery from Amazon, and then also the image at the bottom. Is this, I wonder, is this in my, can you see this? Let's see. Okay. I don't want this to be seen. That's the whole point. Thank you. Okay, so just reiterating that this imagery is starting to be more and more prominent in this culture. And yes, it's about this specific symbolism and the historical ties to obviously everything else that's going on in the collective consciousness, right? But it's also to getting people sort of pre-programmed into this space of totalitarianism. And then the last thing that I talked about in that clip, let me make sure, there was a story that was trending about the latest Disney film. It was either a film or I don't know why my mouse is not moving, but it was a film or a TV show. Let's see if we can get it up here. New Disney series depicts children saying, "We love you, Satan," and you can see the imagery on the left. And then obviously they cleaned it up within that timeline. I mean, on the show or on the series to correct it. I'm assuming, I didn't see the imagery of that, but that, as well as the video, which is on the right-hand side of the news clip, which shows a regular news story being, talked about, which you see the gentleman there in the screen. And then just out of nowhere, a clip of a satanic ritual just jumps into the onto the screen and takes it over for about 2 or 3 seconds. And then the newscast goes directly back to what they were talking about previously. So I tried to put this up on YouTube. They blocked it and said it's blocked in the United States and a bunch of other countries. So you can watch this full video, episode 12, on demand, or like I said, on my membership channel. And if you are interested in joining my membership channel, I have been running a 30% off the annual membership. I've been running that this whole entire weekend. If you're interested in signing up for the annual membership, I will send you the link, or I'll put the link in the description for the 30% off, but that coupon is definitely going to end today. So with all of that being said, let me bring my screen share back to my nice and peaceful environment background so we can get into this subject. I got an email 6 days ago from a beautiful young woman, a beautiful young spirit. She called me her long lost daughter, which this makes my heart flutter a little bit. But she sent me a message that had me very concerned when I read it initially, and I've been wanting to find the time to sit down and talk about this. I just, kind of been juggling a lot of different things, but her question is specifically about domestic violence in the Black community. And I'm assuming that you're not a member of my membership channel. And I'm only bringing that up because we have an Ask Me Anything series on Sundays, which I do. Group members can ask me questions, and then I would then, do a video and put that up in the membership channel. However, I searched her name and her email address, and she wasn't in the membership group. So I'm assuming that you intended for me to respond to you on YouTube in a sort of public forum. I just want to say that because, this is a very serious and deep, ask. And it's a deep conversation, and I, feel humbled and very thankful that you have entrusted your story and your situation with me. I'm not going to read the entire email. I'm just going to, I kind of took certain key statements and copied and pasted them and just created this sort of paragraph of the most fundamental things that I feel like was said in your message. I have continuously been saying, as well as many others, that we are in a spiritual war. And so this spiritual war, it sounds one of those things that's so big that it's almost hard to conceptualize, right? It could mean anything, it could mean everything or nothing at all, right? We're talking about the higher, this war between the higher and lower self, which is the omnipresent sort of dance in all of our realities. The masculine and the feminine, the male and the female, the good and the evil, the freedom versus slavery, the man versus woman dichotomy, all of those extreme polarities are now really sort of coming to the surface and having to duke it out and go head to head, so to speak. In spiritual language, using that type of language wouldn't necessarily be appropriate because, spiritually fighting would be counterproductive, right? Depending on who you're talking about. But for the sake of being able to speak to everyone where they are in terms of consciousness, we'll use that language. And to a degree, it is relative. I think that we as humanity have gotten to this place where, the real freedom versus slavery dichotomy is like serious, strong, staunch. There's no avoiding it. There's no hiding it. That's, really sort of where we are in terms of the collective consciousness. So yeah, the masculine and the feminine and the male, female, and the woman and man, or man and woman dichotomy is on the big stage and is very critical and relative to everything that we see happening in nature, everything we see happening in the skies. When I'm talking about these lines in the sky, the sort of, infiltration and takeover of these satanic elements, how they're coming after our children, how they're, whereas once it was, neutral. Oh yes, we know evil exists, but as long as I take care of me and mine, everything is all good. And now they're like on the offense, like actively pursuing all of us, especially the righteous, right? So I'm just going to highlight a few things that she said in the message. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I am going to read bits and pieces of it. The first thing she asked me was for me to address domestic violence in the Black community. And this is definitely a subject that does not and has not and is not getting enough attention. And the difficulty of navigating this world is kind of coming to a head for everybody. And so I've continuously had women in the conscious community. In particular, I've had women that have been connected to very high profile men in the conscious community that have contacted me and confided in me about being in domestic violence, abusive, emotionally abusive, mentally abusive. And I'm not saying this like there's this major plague that's happening that none of us are talking about. I'm saying this to say that this is a serious issue that is not getting enough focus and attention in the conscious community, in the church, in the mosque, right? And I think that this element of men being superior to women, whether we talk about it from a biblical or a Quranic or a sort of rank and file conversation, it is something that the collective consciousness has embraced and accepted. And so because of that sort of superiority element that's trickled into all aspects of society, domestic violence is one of those sort of unwritten byproducts of us accepting that. And so while we know it's an issue, while we can have compassion for a woman that may be, being physically abused and having programs and things in our communities and whatnot that are assisting these women, in terms of the collective consciousness, there is no real serious effort to change the dichotomy of domestic violence, just like there's no real serious effort to change the dichotomy of rape culture. And I've noticed the anti-female frequency, which has, been emboldened through the means of social media. And we could say, well, for every anti-female platform, anti-Black woman platform, there's 10 anti-Black male platforms, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, in terms of the collective conscious now, there is, it's probably an equal opportunity of the blame game and pointing fingers and, a lot of chaos, a lot of dysfunction, a lot of ignorance representing itself through this, this specific issue. But the difference is that systematically, women have been sort of under the heels of a different type of of oppression and subjugation and, speak when spoken to. Imagine that. Walk behind, me. Imagine that. And this isn't like a 10-year or a 20-year thing. This is hundreds, if not thousands of years that have sort of been embedded into the collective consciousness in many different ways. We would have a certain conversation if we talked about the Greeks and the Romans in terms of the male-female dichotomy. We'd have a different conversation in terms of ancient Kemet versus Africa today. We have a different conversation in terms of the Black male-female dichotomy in 2022 versus the 1940s. But I think we can all agree that all of those women during all of those timelines have been navigating and adjusting to this sort of male dominated, patriarchy dominated, and I use that word tongue in cheek because I don't even like to using it. It's so watered down and you know, it's impotent at this point. Patriarchy, that language, that's, I don't, you know, but when I say that, everybody can sort of be pointed in the same direction. So it's still relative, but that's not my type of language. Like feminism, that's not my type of language either. So domestic violence is another representative of the higher and the lower self, the male-female dichotomy, the imbalance, the lack of male proper emotional and spiritual nurturing and maturation in this world. And so because we don't have a culture of well-adjusted, balanced spiritual and emotional men can't empathize with what it's like to be a woman and with the, you know, the day-to-day experiences and expectations and the anti-female frequency. I can't tell you how many brothers I've had conversations with about Kevin Samuels, and they'll be like, oh, he held to me, he was this and he was that. And I'll say, well, what about when he said this and this and this, you know, and he, well, I don't know anything about that. All I know is, yeah, but how could you just look past what I just said? Because it was like a serious situation. Oh, well, that doesn't have anything to do with me. Yeah, exactly. Again, we've created a culture of boys and men that cannot empathize with the divine feminine, with the woman as being sacred. Look at these podcasts now where these men are sitting around energetically jerking each other off while they complain about everything that women are not. They talk so much better about each other than they do about women. That's why I said, and I keep saying, we need to have relationships, learn how to have relationships without having relationships in terms of the male-female dichotomy. She goes on to say that she's in a toxic relationship with the father of her children. She's got 2 children, a son and a daughter, by this gentleman. She tried to talk to it with her mother and with her grandmother, but neither of them have been receptive or, you know, supporting her in the right type of way. Looks like there's a history of domestic violence in terms of with her mother and with her grandmother. She said that they are collectively, all 3 of these people, sort of getting together to bash her, as well as plotting to take her children away, et cetera, et cetera. Verbally and physically abusive. And there are 2 children caught up in this chaos. So there's a couple of things. The first thing is that, and this is what I talked about this in the Change Your Mind from Lack to Abundance workbook. And this is something that I also help my clients to really sort of underscore, to take the power away from the experience and put you in a position of power. This relationship, not this man, but this relationship is a master teacher. And it's necessary for you to experience and feel and figure out this lesson so that you can master this master teacher. Now, obviously, if I was talking to someone that was in a position to leave today, or that had a support system where they could leave today, or finances, or courage, or strength, et cetera, we'd be having a different conversation. But I'm responding to where this sister is in terms of real-time reality, real life situations, right? So I don't want anybody in the comments to be telling me that I'm, you know, encouraging her to stay in an abusive situation. that would be very blatantly disrespectful to me and to my platform and to the extra care and attention that I'm giving in the words and the languages that I'm using, because I know that I'm dealing with someone whose temperament and whose circumstances is fragile. So that's when I talk about the balance of the male-female dichotomy, the lack of empathy and compassion that this world is embodying, the lack of empathy and compassion that a lot of our men are embodying in terms of how they view the female species. This is exactly what I'm talking about. And so I'm speaking to this young woman in the specific circumstances and conditions that she's in. And hopefully everybody can respect that. So you've got to put yourself in the position, in your mind and in your spirit, in order to take the power away from the circumstance and to give it back unto yourself. This is a master teacher, not him, but the relationship, which has already produced 2 children. And you've got to sit back in your mind, which you can do anywhere at any time, and analyze the frequency of where you were building up to meeting him or to starting this relationship. When I say frequency, I'm talking about how you think, how you feel, how you breathe, how you eat, and how you live. So if this is a 5-year relationship, then think back to where you were 5 years ago. Were you still mad at your mother and your grandmother? Or living? And I say that specifically because in the full email, she talks a lot about her mother and her grandmother, more so than her partner, the children's father. I found that interesting. If we did a numeric, sort of assessment of it, she probably talked about them 60%. She talked about him 20%. And then 10% was just, her talking about me and her experience in watching my content. You said you wanted to break generational curses. And now you find yourself repeating the generational curse. And to that, I'll tell you this, it takes big kahunas to break general curses. You got to be a spiritual warrior to break generational curses. And we're talking about curses that come back from some very, 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 very deep, dark times. So you've got to have the energy to battle demons that are not even yours. That's what breaking generational curses means. And then you've also got to come to grips right now with the potential of your son and your daughter repeating the patterns that they're seeing unfold through your life and your experience. And we know the frequency of those patterns is not just your personal experience. The frequency is also radiating from your mother's personal experience and your grandmother's personal experience. And we know that because 60% of the email was about them. So you're carrying the stress and the weight and the strain of their inability to do the work to heal themselves. That's a very heavy cross to carry. And then you're also always going to be facing the idea that potentially you could be strapping this same cross on your own daughter. I'll just let that resonate in the ethers for just a second. More than likely, what I gathered from the email is that Your family was the foundation of you attracting this experience with this man. Coming from a dysfunctional, volatile, chaotic, and chaos can mean different things. It doesn't mean, people are throwing plates across the walls and fighting every day. It can also mean not talking to each other. Growing up in a household as a child where people are stonewalling you energetically. That's a real thing. And I also noticed that you didn't mention your father and you didn't mention your grandfather. That's the imbalance that I talked about starting out and that I've continuously been talking about. That's the imbalance playing out through your message. Because the women have all the accountability. The women have all the blame. The women have all the responsibility and the focus and the good, bad, or ugly. She did a great job or she did a horrible job. And now you've somehow found yourself wearing those same shoes. Because you're probably a really good mother. But trying to be a really good mother, trying to be a really good anything in an environment where everybody is castrating your spirit, finding ways to sabotage you, to emotionally and mentally demean you, let alone physically. We have a very large element or condition of the broken male or man, not to be confused with anything new and upcoming in terms of gender identification, talking about men or males. The broken man saga. We have these broken men that are, society is denying them and devaluing them and disrespecting them and castrating them and minimizing their value and then we have households with mothers that start the process or fathers that are not available, and there's no collective consciousness, there's no collective energy. When I say collective, that's underscoring the fact that there are individuals in the world that are doing this. I hate when people say nobody's talking about it. There's always somebody talking about it. Nobody's listening. I get so offended when people send me stuff about like the Jim Jones juice or, the white lines in the sky. And then the person in the video is like, nobody's talking about this. Like, don't play with me. Somebody's always talking about it. The question is, who's listening? So these men that have been reared and raised with fathers not being present, or maybe he's present, but he's not emotionally present, and he may even be violent or volatile, or mothers being emotionally unavailable, or not there at all, either or both. My father was sent to California on a bus when he was 14 years old. His mother sent him out here. She had, I think, 11 or 12 children, but his relationship with his mother was very volatile and unbecoming and a little cold-hearted, to be honest. Now, I should look back at it now as a mother. Did I send my 14-year-old child across the country on a bus? And no. Now, was that a different time? Absolutely. Were they forced to make different choices coming from the South? And absolutely. But I would have went to hell and high water to be with mine. And when we did come back together, I would have definitely reestablished and reconfirmed and reiterated and poured whatever I needed to pour into that relationship in order to make sure that it was healthy and wholesome. And that never happened. We have these deep seated secrets and family ties dating back in the Black culture. And, you know, the spiritual warfare is also the light and the darkness. These extreme circumstances of light and darkness now sort of upon all of us. Look what's happening now with pedophilia. There's been people for 20, 30 years screaming to the world, warning, warning. And now in the twinkling of an eye, you know, the whole case is sort of just getting cracked open in front of the world. And hopefully you have the stomach for it. Hopefully you have the heart for it. This is where having growing up in the hood comes in handy. Because you sort of are always sort of on guard a little bit. So, you know, being careful not to get completely knocked over. Sort of standing your ground in your position, ready for anything. So Balenciaga's being exposed. What about when it starts being exposed in our families? We edify pimps in Black culture. Not everybody. Don't write me and say I don't edify pimps. Don't be silly. But as a culture, we edify pimps and hoes. We have a very anti-female frequency in Black culture in America. We love our mothers and our grandmothers, but in terms of our music, in terms of the way we as women represent ourselves, the type of imagery that our men consistently put out to showcase Black women, the language in most rap music, and in most rap songs, and even now in R&B, it's not really loving. So we could say, you know, the Mother's Day is a whole big thing, and then Father's Day we barely blink an eye. But then if the other 364 days where we're devaluing and objectifying or disrespecting or demoralizing all the other women except our mothers and aunties and grandmothers, I don't know. So there's a common consensus to put the children first. So somebody who would be advising you would say, you got to think about your children. You need to get out of there. You can't let them be raised in an environment like that. But the flip side of that is that the average woman in particular, who's stuck in a domestically violent relationship is staying for the children. And you don't have to look very far online for somebody to be talking about how important it is to keep the family structure together, and we have to do whatever we can in order to make our families work. So how do you process that as a woman being in an environment that is mentally and physically not conducive to well-being? So I say, no, you have to put you first. I understand the dichotomy of putting the children first. I'm a mom. I did that for most of my son's life until he became a preteen. And then I realized I am nurturing and raising a developing boy who's getting ready to become a young man. And as he becomes a young man, he's going to go out into the world and live his life and dedicate himself to himself, as he should, and to hopefully becoming the best person that he can be. But in the meantime, and in between time, I have to solidify myself. So by me doing what's in my best interest, it's naturally going to improve and assist my son's trajectory because I'm staying on the love frequency. That's the goal. You aren't doing your children any favors if you're stuck in the frequency of stress and struggle and chaos and lack of clarity. Your children need you to be on the love frequency, however that plays itself out. Self-preservation is the first law of nature, and self-preservation teaches your children self-preservation. They come through us, they don't belong to us. So we have to prepare them for the world, not just our family dynamic. Now, if the family is a strong, subtle, not subtle, stable, strong platform to spring from, that's another conversation. That's not the conversation we're having right now. That's the ultimate goal for all of us. It should be. But we would be foolish to tell a woman, just like we would be foolish to tell a man who's in a relationship with a woman who's sucking the life out of him, pause, draining the life out of him. That's a better language. Neutral language. Draining the life out of him, misusing him, abusing him. I tell men all the time, stop letting these silly women play games with you and use you. But to reiterate the original point and this point, we have not created a society of men that see themselves sacred. Drake said in one of his albums, he had to take the condom off and put hot sauce in it and then throw it away, because he was that concerned with the females that he was involved with, trying to sneak the condom and basically artificially inseminate themselves to have his child. I don't care what the females look like. You cannot possibly value yourself as a man if you have to take those type of precautions in terms of the women that you're giving your body to. It doesn't even, we don't even conceptualize men in that way. That's why I say a lot of the male behavior and a lot of the male, what we call, manhood, quote unquote, is very unhealthy for the average man. Hence the reason why we're producing the sort of experiences that this sister is talking about in her personal relationship. So here's what I would advise for you to do. I would definitely disconnect from your mother and your grandmother as much as possible. I don't know if they're involved with the childcare situation. I don't know, maybe they're assisting you financially. I don't know if this is, I see them all the time, or maybe they're in another city, you guys talk every often. I don't know how intricate and everyday the relationships are versus, talking a couple of times a week. I'm not sure. You said that they were all kind of ganging up on you. So I don't know if he's like high-fiving them. When he's feeling froggish. And it wouldn't surprise me because I've seen very silly and childish mothers and grandmothers put their child's well-being on the back burner in order to skin and grin in some regular dude's face. Yeah, that's that's that mediocre shit all day. It happens all the time. But I would disconnect from them energetically and mentally and emotionally as best as I possibly could. Every time a thought pertaining to your grandmother or your mother comes up that's negative, whether it doesn't matter what it's about, I would take a few breaths and I would find a statement to completely shift to recenter myself. And I've, something to the effect of taking a couple of breaths and saying something like, I'm not exactly where I want to be right now, but I know I'm on my way. Something simple, something neutral, something that's believable, something that's not going to cause a battle in your head or turn, give you a whole new argument path to steer down. Something graceful, something kind to yourself, something that can bring you back in the present moment, come back to your breathing, and then go on to something else. But I would, as much as I possibly could, step away from them, not in the relationship, not write a Dear John letter, but just energetically pull yourself away from that sort of energetic grid so you can start to conceptualize a new and better way of life for you and your children outside of your current paradigm, meaning your household, meaning your children's fathers, meaning that whole unhealthy situation, and then the broader scope of the unhealthy situation, because you said you're going to break generational curses. And I believe you can, because I respect the timeline that we're living in so much. So the timeline on the planet is already chaos. The time on the planet is spiritual warfare. The time on the planet is difficulty if you are not in alignment. The time on the planet is confronting the darkness. So your soul and your life trajectory set up an experience for you to be in the fire while the world is in the fire. That tells me there's big things on the horizon for you. The pendulum always has to swing back to the equal or greater opposite or side. I've always referenced the Kabbalion in talking about the law of compensation, the law of polarity and rhythm. So whatever the dynamic of your difficulty, of your struggle, of your abuse, of the nature of your relationships around you, the more difficult, the more traumatic, the more unsavory the experiences, once you start to swing the pendulum back in the other direction, meaning I choose me, meaning I choose my children, meaning I deserve better than this, meaning this is not what I came here for. Once you actively internally make those choices and make those decisions, the pendulum is going to swing in the other direction. And the more clear you get, the more concise you get in your thinking, the higher you raise your vibration or your frequency based on how you're thinking, how you're eating, how you're living, how you're breathing, and how you're feeling. The higher the vibration, the higher the frequency, the sharper the further to the other end of the pendulum you'll go. So you're going to have either the same level of abundance as lack and difficulty, or greater. The same level of support that you didn't have, meaning, for example, I didn't have support my whole life. Okay, then you have support the rest of your life. That's sort of like universal godly type inner conversations, inner awareness, states of consciousness. But you have to have the ability to conceive it. So, along with giving your mother and your grandmother 50 feet, I would definitely find some alone time before or after your household works up, where you won't be interrupted, where everybody sleeps, where there's no other energies besides your energy active. And I would create a 10 to 15 minute breathing regimen where you sit with yourself. I have a Power of the Subconscious Mind meditation. You can listen to that, or just some frequencies and some sound healing type music like I have playing in the background, focusing on your breathing and speaking life into your spirit. Start to visualize a life outside of the life that you're currently physically experiencing. Think about where you want to live with your children. Think about pulling up to your house every day and being so happy and so satisfied that you're walking into a house that's peaceful and loving and nurturing. Go here in your mind, because if you can master your mind, you can master anything. I would limit all conversation outside of what it is that I want in your relationship, in your family, as much as you possibly can. Some of that's going to be just being very neutral about certain subjects instead of speaking up and saying exactly what you think or telling someone they're wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not just talking about the relationship. This is about maintaining energy. This is about becoming conscientious of how much of your energy is dispersed to your mother, to your grandmother, to your relationship, to your children, to the world, to all of the outside elements that's taking place, comparing and contrasting that with how much you're actually pouring within. And the numbers will be staggering. They always are. So from that vantage point, I would limit all conversations outside of what I want as much as you possibly can. That includes and is most relative to the conversation happening in your own mind. Find something that gives you joy, something that makes you feel the love frequency, and do it as much as you possibly can. And more important than all of that, because again, I said, you know, I'm talking to someone that I'm assuming can't just leave right now. Someone who doesn't have a support system and who doesn't have a way out in her mind. You should definitely have an immediate plan for if the situation escalates, though. I will say that. If it becomes unbearable. And I don't know how volatile the situation is, but you have to, above everything that I've said in this video so far, you have to make the decision. And you haven't made the decision yet. I can tell from the frequency and the undertone in the video, and that's not a judgment or a critique. None of this is about, you know, this is all coming from love. This is all coming from a place of how do we start to cultivate strength? How do we start to cultivate confidence? How do we start to cultivate the right type of conversation within so that you not only can rise above this experience and this relationship, but also that you never run into this type of experience and relationship again. This is bigger than him. He's just playing his position. Once you make the decision in your mind and in your heart, absolutely 100% definitive, sure, the universe is going to move heaven and earth in order to bring about whatever the best case scenario to protect you and your children and to move you into the next stage of your life is. But you have to make the decision. Remember, you're having a traumatic experience in parallel, running parallel with worldwide trauma. So this is not easy. All of us are under the gun. And the people who don't know they're under the gun are the most under the gun. So you're having a very traumatic experience during worldwide trauma. So please be grateful and be careful with yourself. The bigger picture for all of us is, can we seek and find refuge within? If you can seek and find refuge, you know, we say being in this world, but not of it. If you can be in this world and not be of it within your own household, that being the goal, we don't want to live there. But again, we're creating the building blocks of courage, the building blocks of confidence, the building blocks of clarity. Because when you start stepping away from the fear and self-doubt, that's the environment that creates clarity. A lot of times we can't make decisions because there's too much static and too much chaos, and the world is too loud, and our family is too loud, and the past experiences and the mistakes and the whole program running in our head that has us doubting ourselves and fearing the world, fear of living at any sort of substantial pace, anything worth writing home about, created a world full of mediocre people. I don't say that, it sounds horrible. There's probably a better way for me to say it. I'll find it eventually. You didn't come to live mediocre, because look at the severity of the life lessons that you're experiencing during the parallel of global and universal lessons being instilled and downloaded into all of us. You came to live big. I have to say it. Not big like fame, not big like money, but big like this is the time of spiritual warfare and my soul wants to be free. And these people are trying to take everybody into a psychosis of slavery. You got to jump because you're dealing with a real-time, real-life situation that's a microcosm of the macrocosm that everybody in the world is experiencing. So you actually have an advantage right now. Take advantage of the advantage. Seek and find refuge within you as well as all of us. That's the real caveat, the real spiritual lesson, the real thing that all of us are really supposed to be honing in on right now, individually and collectively, as a woman and as a mother, as a man and as a father, auntie, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers, cousins, neighbors, relationships, friendships, etc. Seeking refuge and finding refuge within self is refuge in Allah, refuge in the All, refuge in God. It's an individual experience that is shared and felt and experienced in the collective consciousness. So everything that you're experiencing, everything that you're going through, all the conversations you're having with yourself, all your varying emotions throughout the day, your love for your children, maybe your love for this man, maybe your disdain for this man, maybe your disdain for your mother and for your grandmother, maybe your disdain for family or for or society. All of it matters. All of that data is being collected and analyzed on a universal level. So now you've got to give the universe a new program, new instructions, because the tune that you've been singing and the program and the energetic resonance that you've been sending out to the universe has you locked in a frequency. We can see what the frequency has produced, right? Through the relationship, through your physical and emotional and mental experiences. So this is a video that I played this in the headline news segment 2, episode 12, excuse me, the one I just did, the one I talked about at the beginning. I played this at the end. We did a special segment called Keeping the Heart Strong. So I turned the volume off because I want to make this point applicable specifically to you. I also played this video in my presentations in New York and Atlanta. But my point is, this video is of they're studying human auras through specific types of film in order to record bioengineer. See, I lost what she said too quick. So let's do this the right way. ZaZa, come on now. All right. We'll start over. Human Auras Authentic Audio Recordings Bioenergy Lab. This is an actual audio recording of a human aura in a bioenergy field. This auric field is documented in a laboratory that recorded the yellow and green frequencies in the energy field. Notice the constant moving dynamics. Notice the shift in frequency signature as the same subject, the yoga instructor, shifts states of consciousness. This higher vibratory field is documented as the gold frequency signature in the human bioenergy field. Okay. And so with that as our backdrop, and with the conversation that we just had about what we attract, what state of mind we're in, when we attract it, auras dynamically change, physical changes, feeling states, motivation, object radiation, and living radiation. This applies to all of us. You don't have to know the schematics of physics or understand chemistry and biology. It's good to understand it, but this relates to all of us. So this is showing the aura. Here you see of the dog, his or her energetic resonance. And then you can see the change in the energetic aura in terms of the color and in terms of the expansion of the aura. This is the love frequency. It makes the whole concept of vibration and energy a little bit more real than the Hallmark card kind of sentiment that it has now. You can see this person by the beach. And of course, the radiance is magnified anytime we're close to nature. So you see the strong sort of energetic pull of the water and the frequency of the ocean being magnified, those two being connected to each other, because it's not just the beach, that's the nature. It's the guy or the gal, I can't really tell in this image. And so I'm showing these images because you, sis, have an electromagnetic field about yourself. You are constantly radiating an emotion, a frequency, or an energy that is dictating your timeline, your level of consciousness, and your everyday experiences, right? And so let's start focusing less on the totality of the relationship. This is going within yourself, and start focusing on this energetic resonance. What am I radiating on a day-to-day basis? Am I on a love frequency today? Do I feel passionate? Do I feel enthusiastic? Do I feel hopeful? Do I feel inspired? Do I feel optimistic? This is why creating a visualization for what you want to come into your life helps you to tune out of your world and tune into the quantum realm. So you see this interaction here, this woman who is meditating and the child, and how the aura is increasing based on her frame of reference, based on his presence. We want the frequency strong. We want to get out of the pessimistic, frustrated, angry, worried, doubtful frequency and into the frequency of love and the frequency of light. That's your job right now. Seek and find refuge within self. If you can master your mind, you can master anything. Hopefully you're in a position where you can go outside and take walks, put your feet in the ground, let the sun hit your face, focus on your breathing, go online and watch some beginner yoga classes if you've never done yoga before. If you can do it all in the house, do it all in the house. If you need to go out into the world, and you can go out into the world, seek and find refuge within self. Find language, find material, find books, find scriptures, find videos, find content that magnify you spiritually, but that also make you feel creative and that invigorate the creative factor. I need for everybody listening to my voice, women in particular, to magnify the love frequency. Find something that you are very good at doing creatively, whether it's for money or not, whether it's for service to other people or not. Because we need to magnify the love frequency, and nothing magnifies the love frequency more than being in a zone, doing something or experiencing something that you love. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. ZaZaAli.com is my website. I've written 6 books, working on my 7th book, 4 metaphysics workbooks, 2 books, Black Matter series. I'm working on Ancient People, a social studies and history textbook, volume 1. I'm very excited about that. And I am 100% in the love frequency when I'm pouring myself into that book. So that's my gift to the world in this hour. And hopefully this message will inspire you, will turn the light on in your heart and in your mind and in your spirit, and inspire you to come back to the fullness of your true and authentic self. Thank you for entrusting me with your experience, in the hopes that I would say the right thing and to handle this in the proper way. And I hope I did. Sending all of you guys peace and love, and I will see you very soon. Peace.